Okay, it's recording now, and welcome everyone to July 29th, 2021 Flux project meeting, CNCF Flux project meeting, the late meeting. This is 11 a.m. Eastern time. I'm going to paste the link now to today's notes. I'll be moderating for today, and Kingdon, thanks for taking notes. Obviously, anyone else, please feel free to pitch in to help with notes too. We do not have a list of agenda items yet. So maybe let's take a moment and think about what we might want to address and pop them into the agenda, if that sounds okay. If anyone on the call does not have availability right now to open that doc or write into it, feel free to just chime in and we can write it down for you. Okay, just one more moment. Okay, well, we have a couple of we have a couple of agenda items at least. So you know what? Why don't I put mine below yours, Kingdom? I'd rather hear yours first.
Sure.
Go ahead. And again, if anyone else has something, please just speak up or we'll pop it on that agenda. Okay, Kingdom.
So I was hoping we would have some of the core maintainer team here because I've got a few questions related to this agenda item here that's called Flux V1 success stories. But maybe they'll catch up with this on the video or I can catch up with them otherwise. I just wanted to share a few issue reports that we've gotten. I'm calling them success stories because of the context that'll make more sense if I explain what the issues are about exactly. So just to cut to the chase, we've had a couple of new reports on Flux V1 of long-standing, well-known issues that really I'm taking as an indication of Flux's success because they're issues that happen when you get to an extremely high degree of scale. And the scaling issues range from, we have Flux pulling many unused images constantly. That's a common report that's documented in the FAQ right at the top. People have been really understanding, and we've found some people that haven't been aware of Flux V2 that had to be raised. So this is one of the architectural issues in Flux V1 that prompted breaking changes in Flux V2 that Flux had to pull down every single image layer metadata in order to order them all by build time. And that since Docker Hub and many other repositories have rate limited this feature, people tend to have problems with it, especially when they have lots of different images with lots of different builds running in their cluster. Besides that one, another interesting report that we've had is that people are running into collisions with 7-character or 8-character, I think 7-character Git short hash codes when they use FluxCTL to release a new commit. They're finding that they have collisions. And we had some people do the math, and they found that this can only happen if you're familiar with the birthday problem. Like if you have 10,000 commits that Flux is aware of, then you can get a collision 17% of the time. So it's not completely unheard of, but you have to reach extremely high scale. And the other issue I wanted to note is that we had one person reporting that they were on Flux 0.6.3 and just now running into issues. 0.6.3 is a chart that we released in well before I was here, 2019, February. So Flux served them well for that long without upgrades, so I count all three of these as success stories and scaling success stories, even though they're issues that we hope to address in upcoming Flux V1 releases. None of them are, as far as I can see, require a breaking change to actually resolve. And we've had some people contributing code and finding where the change should go. So we're taking it slow because maintenance mode, and we want to be extra careful not to cause any breaking changes and honor our SEMVer commitment. But that's my Flux War Stories agenda item here. Thought that was pretty neat.
That's awesome. So I tried to take some notes while
I'll clean them up. Thank you for getting most of that.
No worries. Yeah, if someone can help me, that's cool too. And I think you have the next item too, the bug scrub.
And the bug scrub is now a regular event. There should be another blog post coming out soon or already out, I'm not sure, that describes a couple of links on where you can go to find out more about the bug scrub. But if you're interested in Flux V2 development and want to learn more and get familiar with people on the Flux team and familiar with the issues in the queue and pull requests, it's a great opportunity to just go over issues for about an hour. It happens once a week. It's on the Flux Dev calendar, the CNCF calendar. And we hope you can join us. Volunteers should expect to, if they're interested in taking on an issue for themselves, to come away with an issue assignment. But people are welcome at any level, whether you have coding skills or Go skills or not. If you're interested in Flux enough to receive this message, then please consider joining us.
Right. All right, fantastic. And I pasted the link to the blog post, both in the notes and in this Zoom chat for folks. I think that's the one you're talking about, right, Kingdon, the June bug scrub announcement?
There's a new blog post that's coming out soon that doesn't refer to any specific date. That's one issue that we've heard is people are reading the blog post and it says the first bug scrub is on June, and they think, oh, that means it's already happened. But it's a weekly event, to be totally clear, and we should have a blog post out soon that doesn't say that, so we can retweet it every week without having to update it and amend it with the current date.
Ah, I see. Yeah, so the not the July update, but the August update, right?
Yeah, the one that's due out any day now.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, that's coming. Let me just make a quick note of that.
Chucking that sort of thing into the contributing doc on in the repo might make sense. I wouldn't have even thought to go look for the blog post about such a thing.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. Let's add that as an action item, huh?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay.
I think I actually have a PR open for contributing already, so I'll just mash them together.
That is great. Okay, I have the next agenda item. This one could take like 12 hours, so I'll keep it really, really short. But I'll paste this issue in the Zoom chat too, and it's already in the doc. So there is an initiative going on right now, which some of you know about. I almost hesitate to call it an initiative because that makes it sound like it's going to take a really long time. But the goal is to do this rather quickly. There is a project to that many pieces of it have already happened, to basically create standards, define standards for Flux controllers that are unified in Flux CD/PKG and specifically package runtime. So this is something that's already been committed to package runtime. There are RC versions out. If you check out the releases page, where this can be used already, and we're on RC2 now. HITA, hats off to HITA for putting in, I believe, months of effort building up to this, and basically taking a lot of repeating logic that's used throughout the controllers, largely around conditions, but other things as well, and moving those into shared helper functions in package runtime. So that is accompanying a pull request that in source controller, which is kind of a lot of files for anyone that's seen that. And that's linked in the issue that I sent. The reason that there's so many files touched in that is because that pull request against source controller was being written in tandem with the work on package runtime, so that it was clear that it was useful. Of course, some of it has to be anticipated for how it's useful for the other controllers, but also directly used as well in source controller. So what I've been doing is connecting with several people who are already very familiar with controller runtiming, and specifically very, very familiar with conditions in Kubernetes core controllers, and its history as well, the history of status and conditions and so on, and working on gaining a better understanding of that so we can roll those changes out to the other controllers. That's what this, so this top level issue that says define and unify Flux controller standards, we've set several stages. Stage 0 is done, documenting the package and APIs, providing additional helpers. There is a top level README inside of the package runtime directory. So in that repo, in the runtime directory, and it really, I think it does a very good job of explaining what the purpose of that package is, and specifically sections on each of the helper sections, conditions being the largest, most central one of them. So the next stage is rolling out those standards to all Flux controllers, and that's, I'm just going to copy the link. Sorry, let's paste the link here to that issue. It's linked from the initial one, but that's stage 1, and that lists all of the controllers, the Flux controllers that are currently under Flux CD GitHub org, and they're listed right now in order of priority. The source, the notification controller is the current priority because it's after really diving into the Helm controller with this, we realized there's kind of a lot to untangle. And so the notification controller is really the first one. I'm mentioning this because while so far these collaborations have been invite only, if any of you are very well versed in controller runtime and specifically conditions, please reach out to me because there is an opportunity to collaborate on that initially. The goal is once we get one of these controllers fully, I don't want to say refactored, but let's just say, well, I suppose it is refactoring, but backwards compatible refactoring to use this central package, then we can create tasks for discrete actionable tasks for the other controllers, and then that can be divvied up amongst other people, and hopefully that will help folks get more involved in writing or contributing to the Flux controllers. So yeah, just if you're watching this video or if you're on the call, just reach out to me if that's an interest. I know Kingdon has expressed interest, and I'm not sure exactly the timeline, but several others that you might know have expressed interest. So just reach out, Slack, email, or I can be reachable through GitHub, but try to ping me on Slack if you can. I hope that is it for that. Let's see, do we have any other agenda items?
Got one. There's a couple of, I hesitate to call it advanced, but a little bit of non-basic, at the very least, use cases that you can do with Flux, which the documentation probably could do a better job of describing. So for example, in Flux v1, you had one Git repo that an instance of Flux was monitoring, and there were a couple of cool things you could do with one copy of Flux, installing many other namespaced copies of Flux, looking at other repos and get multi-tenancy, and this was fantastic, but heavyweight and very complicated. And with Flux v2, you can go have multiple Git repository sources, which is basically the same thing, except lighter weight. But that really opens the door to lots of little tiny micro repos for a little piece of config for one app or one customer or one tenant or one shard, or pick your construct of choice. This is not celebrated much in the docs. You know, nothing really goes out and says, like, you could just make 200 of these things. You know, it's like you could make one. Yeah, that's everywhere. Maybe it says you can make two. You got the one thing and also the other app, or you have the infrastructure bits and then you have your app developer bits, but doesn't really say, hey, you got one person, they can make hundreds of these things and go completely nuts with them. And I'm wondering if that's because of someone knowing that there's a problem that you will hit at that sort of scale, or if it's just because it's assumed to be known, or what.
Or if it's meant to be understood that if you're doing things at that scale, it's going to be difficult and you'll probably have other weird things that we can't account for in the docs. I get where you're coming from.
It's fuzzy.
Some of them might be common to everyone and some of them might be your weird edge case.
Sure. I mean, to be fair, there's certainly a lot of, once you push the system to the edges, expect weird things. That comes with the territory. But
scale those things myself, I've seen places where I would have thought a single repo would make the most sense, where I've kind of decided that it might make more sense to have multiple repos, and I don't see a lot of people agreeing with that strategy without like some kind of concrete proof of why. Like oh, well, if all of the changes go to one repo, then when you set up a notification alert to trigger reconciling, then everything's going to reconcile at once and it will bog down your entire cluster. That would be something that would be great to cover in a doc.
Maybe. Alternatively, I've got one repo with a very different permission model attached to it for who can make changes and what. It only deals with workflows as opposed to general infrastructure of everything. So a bunch of slightly more businessy people are going to be making modifications to it, and that repo isn't allowed to have things in it like cluster-wide resources or whatnot, right? It's namespace to only certain things. But by the same token, it's a lot more loose in terms of who can make changes and when, less of, the approval processes are lower. It's accessible to more people. And that kind of, it turns into, you can organize things however you want, but there is not very much guidance provided for recipes on those fronts. I don't know whether there should be necessarily, but I've sometimes wished there was. There was some attempt at it with the old Flux v1 multi-tenant example repos.
I can definitely, I took notes on what you were saying, Alan, so thanks for pointing that out. That's great. Two quick things. One is the use case that you mentioned is the very first one that came to my mind, which is that, generally when structuring a repo, structuring repos for Kubernetes manifests is outside of, apart from Flux, is already a known problem space. Is there great documentation about that out there? I don't really know of any. So if anyone does know of some that's independent of Flux, maybe we could even tie to that or bring that in. But either way, I agree. I definitely agree with you that how to structure a repo and recipes for that is really important. The reason that we've discussed this so far about in the documentation initiative, and the reason that we haven't done a lot of that so far is because there are so many different possibilities out there, and the known problem space more generally is that your Git repo ideally represents the structure of your organization and your organization and your team's permission models, like you mentioned, Alan. And there are a few different ways that are known to reflect that. And as far as I know, and I'm just spitballing off the top of my head, the ones that I know of are to split those up by domain. Or excuse me, split by domain in the sense of split those up across different repos, so that different Git repos can have by default, different permissions of any kind, regardless of your Git provider platform, even if it's self-hosted Git or whatever. Second is with certain provider platforms, there are permission models per branch protection. And for example, GitHub has this, I believe GitLab has that, but I haven't actually used that. Pure Git does not have that, so this isn't really totally cross-compatible as a solution, but different branches could have different permissioning models. That opens up its own problems, especially when thinking about merging branches.
I actually opened up that bug about the GitHub branch permission thing.
Okay. Great.
So,
great.
Yeah, edge cases that aren't really checked for.
Got it. Okay. That's good to know. Okay, we'll look at that. And then the third way that I'm aware of,
not something that needs dealing with.
Yeah, no, that's a really good. It's glad that I'm glad, and it's good that you're really finding these, because I agree with you, it's a gap in the docs. And the third way, real fast, is different Git provider platforms have their own permissioning system built in. You know, like GitLab has their ACL way of doing it. GitHub has their code owners file, and that often we make heavy use of that in different projects. So that's what I'm aware of in terms of the structure. But I know that one of the reasons that that many repos isn't initially recommended is because our main goal with Flux is that it's very flexible now, the current version of Flux, right? Flux 2 above 2.0, right? Or excuse me, above Flux 2, right? It's very flexible. It's meant to be able to accommodate any number of repos in any different situations so that you can accommodate these various models. But with that kind of flexibility and that kind of power comes the possibility for a lot of confusion. And so we've really tried to keep it simple when introducing how to do this in the docs. So I would say that if we had an advanced topic like edge cases like you're suggesting, or even just scale cases, or highly distributed multi-permissioning models, that would be a very advanced topic, and we'd have to highlight that up front, like, do not start with this, you know, because it would turn people off. It would make them think perhaps that that Flux is overly complicated, when I think our main problem right now is giving simple recipes. But that's my 2 cents. I would love to see a contribution around that, and maybe that would be a good discussion item to start and see how we work toward a new doc page. That's my thought.
Okay, cool.
So from my perspective, there's probably good documentation around already, like the simple back-end, front-end use case where you have 2 apps involved. I think that PodInfo probably does that. So what we're looking for, Alan, is a good overview of how you can go past 2, which seems like a very reasonable thing to try to nail down. And I think that there's probably at least two approaches, but off the top of my head, 2 approaches, regardless of your Git provider or permission structure, that are orthogonal. You have the umbrella chart approach, where you've got many separate repos that all feed into a central, the Deis workflow approach is how I'm going to call it, where you have one central repo that describes the whole picture, and many individual app repos that feed into it. And then probably the other approach is where everything is stuffed into one, or the majority of everything, whatever your after 2 are stuffed into a single shared repo for all the groups, whether it's just the manifests that live there, or the whole application and every manifest and all that stuff. It would be reasonable, I think, to document both approaches and show how they perform and how they would change at scale as you go from 2 to 10 to 500. So I think that's a reasonable ask for something that we could try to make sure makes it into the documentation before we declare GA. I don't speak for the entire group, but that would be something I would expect.
Okay.
You want me to make an action item for you, Alan? Are you interested in starting a discussion about it?
So yes. However, the amount of stuff that was just iterated is far more than one person, especially someone has a day job. There's a piece of it that might be easy to start with that I also wanted to mention. So you touched on some of the simple cases for repository structuring. And we did have some examples. We kind of have some right now. There's some recipes that I've been using internally, and I was thinking of just publishing some of them. For example, I often have a repo with a directory per namespace, just to keep things somewhat organized. And then having, assuming that this is a repo for a cluster, which is often the case. And then I will end up wanting to ensure that everything is valid in there on every commit or pull request. And so there'll be a bit of CI shenanigans to go run some scripts to go do some checks. I often use conf test and kubeval, and I wire up the CRD checking bits on both of those. So I also have a directory full of CRD Open API spec files in the repo to validate against. And then a couple of shell scripts that do things like iterate through the directories, looking for customization files, doing a customized build on them, stuffing them in a temp directory, and letting those other tools run against it. None of which has anything to do with Flux. Except once someone starts using a tool like Flux to go and deploy from a Git repo, then validating the contents of the repo is probably important. So I don't know, these things end up going hand in hand a lot, I think, as people go on this sort of journey. Maybe some of those repo structures would be a useful place to start. But they're very opinionated, and I'm not sure whether the Flux group wants to, be in the business of saying, test your repo contents with third-party component X.
I think we do that a lot in the docs, and it's probably something to be avoided in core documentation, but we also have things like the JSON and Jenkins. Those are definitely third-party components that have nothing to do with Flux, and we added them to the documentation because it's on the way, and it's something that people are always asking about. So I would be interested to review anything you want to contribute and help to find a place for it in the docs so that we can have at least one answer for these types of questions. It doesn't have to be the answer, and maybe we add more later, but you're absolutely right. Biting off 2 or 5 approaches and saying we're going to do all these is probably not going to happen.
Okay, I'll look at making an example repo to start with, and then talk about it.
Cool. Look forward to seeing it.
Great, and I'm putting a link to the area of the docs where that Kingdom was just mentioning. It's the use cases section. And I'll also link it in the Zoom chat right now. That's great. If there was something that was more not comprehensive, but if there was something that was more a general problem space and not necessarily focused on a specific tool, that could potentially then go in the guide section. But I think the use cases section right now that's the place where we have integrations with other tools and things you can do, not necessarily. Yeah, so for example, if you wanted to have a recipe with for CI with tools that you mentioned, then the use cases might be a good place to go. Whereas a wider page on helping people understand a multi-permissioning model and how and the various options for that might be good for the guides.
I agree. I think that's a really good way of delineating these 2 sections.
Cool.
It looks like everything in use cases is quite opinionated about a piece of tooling. So that ceases to be a problem to add to.
Great, okay. That's wonderful. So do you want me to add an action item for you, or do you want to just keep checking back in?
As long as you don't hold me to completing the action item, you could totally add it.
Yeah, it would be more like, would you like to start a discussion on this, or do you think it would be better for someone else to do that and just link to what this conversation?
It's over. You're already committed.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I am. Go ahead and put my name on there.
Okay, that's not a commitment beyond just simply starting a discussion. It could take 1 minute or more, depending.
I'm joking, of course.
Thanks. Okay, that was really awesome. Do we have any other topics that folks wanted to cover, or maybe any questions, or either about things that have come up already, or anything new?
This isn't really a question or anything, but I guess I'll just mention why I'm here. I'm Evan Cordell, and Nick is also here from Operator Framework. And we've been working on some stuff that we think has some potential for collaboration with Flux. We had been talking to Lee and Daniel in Cluster Add-ons a bit, and they suggested we show up. So we don't have anything to present or anything. We're just kind of showing up to see what's going on here and say hello, and maybe sometime in the future we'll have something more interesting to say.
That's
On
awesome.
the way to OLM Dev and Kubernetes the other day. I'm glad to see you here.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, welcome you two. What kind of collaborations do you have in mind?
We didn't really want to come like hijack your call or anything, but the Operator Framework has been working on spinning out a small project to deal with some problems that Operator Framework has around delivering content to clusters via images. We realized that a lot of the stuff we were designing has some similarities to source controller, but with kind of a different approach to the APIs. So I think there's a bunch of different potential futures where this makes sense to work with Flux on. The simplest one just being we do what we're planning to do, and then maybe vendor and source controller for some of it. But from talking to Lee, it sounded like there's maybe potential for something slightly deeper if we want to. So yeah. Be fun to dig into that. It's a future call maybe.
Cool, I'm just taking some notes on this. This is awesome. I'm very interested in that. And also, what I had mentioned about Flux CD package runtime earlier, specifically around making sure conditions are ordered properly and so on. I wonder if you're going to be dealing with some of the same things,
That is very possible. I don't have a lot of context for the things you're talking about before. I just kind of like looking through the GitHub issues right now.
Got it. Let me send you a link for now, just so that I know this is more just a hello, but we could at least send some of what, some of what's in here. Since this is a big focus at this moment for the Flux controllers, including, you're talking about potentially vendoring in some of source controller. There's a big PR to refactor pieces of source controller to use this new package. And so if you're interested in vendoring that in, I would really recommend using, at least for now, taking a look at that branch, that pull request branch. Here is the package, a link to the top level README in the package. And here is the PR for source controller that makes use of that.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, we'll take a look at this and see what we want
Maybe
to do.
just to make the connection a little bit more. Scott mentioned I've been in some of these meetings and I understand a little bit, but I am also primarily tasked with maintaining Flux V1, which does not use operators. So I'm a little bit outside of the whole thing, and I might explain it a little differently. What I was taking in from the conversation was that there is general effort focused around building the standards to a place where we can communicate them to new people who want to build new controllers in the style of Flux. And sounds like what you're building. And the general gist of it is that we need to refactor certain parts out to our core package so that they're reusable. And in the meantime, some of those things are being updated to fit the idea of the standards that we have described, but haven't necessarily implemented. So hopefully that helps a little bit to provide context about why this is related. Because if you're trying to build a new Flux controller, we would certainly want you to build it using the new best practices driven standards that we're developing, and not a copy of the existing code base or even necessarily vendor of the code base, since this effort is for new controllers to help make them less focused on undifferentiated heavy lifting things that might be difficult to get right on the first try.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I think that makes sense. We're probably a good ways off from needing to do that just yet, but we can keep an eye on this stuff and keep talking to you guys and see.
Great.
That's awesome. And since you work on the operator framework, I mean that is built on controller runtime now, right? That has been updated for a while now. Am I right about that?
Yes, the operator SDK uses controller runtime,
Okay.
but not necessarily everything that's like part of operator framework uses controller runtime. If
that makes sense. Well, if you're interested in joining some of what I had mentioned before, hit me up.
Yeah, I'm happy to take a look. I wasn't clear on what specific questions there were. It's not just kind of like a general brainstorming thing.
It is fairly, yeah, I was being fairly vague because we haven't yet opened this up to be public. One of our goals is to do some regular public workshops even on basically how to write a controller using the GitOps toolkit, aka Flux CD packages and controllers. So at the moment, we're really just rolling out these changes to the other controllers so that looking through all of that code can exemplify some of these. They're not really new standards, but they are newly unified standards. They're standards that have been in Flux controllers and the just the GitOps toolkit in general for a while, just not always as consistently throughout all the controllers. So that's why they were moved into a separate package, and we're using that as a way to unify them. So what I mentioned that if it's not really set up yet for general consumption at all, and it would take kind of a bit to put that kind of presentation together. Or put that kind of workshop together, but for people like potentially you two who are potentially already very familiar with controller runtime, that could actually be a very good collaboration. So we're working with folks who are doing that in order to take discrete tasks and to make use of this package. So
Yeah, I'm definitely interested to see more of that. I don't know if this overlaps at all, but in operator framework, there's an operator lib, and it sounds like a similar idea of just like, if you're writing a controller, here's a common task you might want to do, grab this library and do it. So it might be interesting. It sounds like obviously focused more on the GitOps, things you might want to do that are GitOpsy. But I wonder if there's a way maybe to make those things work well together or something like that. I'm off the cuff here because I haven't looked at it at all yet. So I don't know.
Same. That's how collaborations get started, right? I mean, I would say like perhaps we should have an exploratory conversation about it. You know, a no commitment exploratory.
I don't know if I have the context for this, but I just opened up the operator lib. I'm interested to see if it looks to an outsider like I still kind of consider myself an outsider. If it looks similar in any way, if you squint to the Flux PKG efforts that are going on.
That's a good question. Yeah, Nick just mentioned in the chat that it's pretty old. One of the things that the SDK team is looking at doing, there's a bunch of stuff like this that's used for building the controllers that are part of OpenShift, and that's in a separate repo. And so, but I think that the plan is to like take some of the stuff that is used in OpenShift and then maybe strip out the OpenShift specific stuff and make that part of that library. I don't think that's super far along yet though, so I'm not sure how much you'll see.
That would be amazing. Yeah, I'm curious now. I'm very curious now. That's great. And of course, you know, Lee knows what he's talking about. So after speaking with you all and suggesting that you come here, I'm guessing that there's a high likelihood that there's going to be some overlap. Exactly what and what we could do about it, we can figure that out, see if it's valuable. But you know, we're very open to collaboration, specifically productive collaboration. There have been points in the past where there's been an interest in collaboration, I think, from people higher up in the company, but then development teams themselves may not have necessarily been as keen to do it. So I think like it really only works if folks are interested. And yeah, so let's chat and see. If you want, we can set up a walkthrough of the two code bases.
Yeah, I think that, so I was going to be my next question. So is this something where it's, you know, we should sort of prep like a little presentation and come to the next week, or I don't know if this is bi-weekly, and just kind of do that, and then vice versa? Or do you want to set up separate calls? Because I mean, I do like that it could be recorded so that folks that can't make it can come see it. That's
a really good idea. I mean, I would have suggested, hey, let's do it right now, but we only have 9 minutes left, so.
Yeah, not sure that's quite enough time. We have some recordings of some of this stuff from just discussing it in the operator framework calls, but I worry that they might be too like inside baseball if without some extra explanation.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know which is best. Maybe if we don't have a lot on the agenda for next time, we could do that. Or, you know, we can also just set up another call and record it and make that available, put that in our docs or whatever, like we do for all these other meetings. I'm open to that. This is a major focus of mine, so that's why I'm right now. So that's why I'm saying I'm happy to meet even outside of these Flux calls, but and I don't necessarily know if there would be a lot more to discuss next time, where, you know, it wouldn't give us enough time to do this. So I would say let's try to set up a separate meeting, and we could make it clear in CNCF Flux Slack, CNCF Slack channel for Flux. And oh my God, you know what I'm saying? The CNCF Slack Flux channel. Thank you. There we go.
Yes.
Just so other folks can be invited to come if they're interested. But the main goal would be to really focus specifically on these code bases, it sounds like. And we could record it, sure.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. I did want to make something clear, like the stuff we were talking about, the operator lib thing and the I think the package, that is new to me as of this call. That sounds like an interesting way we could collaborate. The thing that we had been talking to Lee about was a separate project called Ruckpack that we're working on, an operator framework that is looking to do, it's very similar in several of its goals to source controller, but we have different like API shape needs. And so the question was, does it make sense to try? We think that both shapes are valuable. We think that like the shapes that source controller is using make sense and are valuable. We just have different needs in operator framework. And so, potentially these become projects that work well together. Potentially there's some deeper level of integration there. We just kind of like wanted to talk about it and see what you guys think.
Absolutely, that sounds great.
Is that a still internal code word there? I haven't found anything about it Googling Ruckpack.
It's not super internal. I think we've got a public repo for it. Nick, do you have the link handy? It's just not very far along is the problem. There's just not a lot about it.
That's great. Thank you for being so open about this. Personally, I know.
I spelled it wrong. You got it.
Okay. I can't speak for obviously, all the Flux maintainers or anything like that, but I personally really appreciate this kind of collaboration. It's one of the reasons why one of the main reasons why I was interested in open source OSS. So cool.
Yeah, and I don't know. I'm not aware of too many other things like this. Don't want to put the cart before the horse, but let's say we do find some cool ways to collaborate. That seems like something that CNCF would push for and maybe help us with, give some resources. I don't know, but it seems like a positive outcome of the CNCF project.
Yeah, that's part of the CNCF's mission, right? To help foster collaborations between these projects. So yeah, cool.
So this is Nick. I just linked a presentation that Evan put together a while ago. I don't know how accessible that is, but this kind of supplements the repository since we didn't drop any sort of projected design docs in there yet.
Great.
Cool.
Okay, I'm just going to add an action item for us to follow up. How about that?
Sounds good.
Or let's say schedule a recorded chat looking through code bases and higher level needs, looking for possible overlap. / collaboration. Okay, cool. Okay, cool. Well, we have 2+ minutes left, so I don't think that's really enough time for another topic unless there was a quick question or something like that, or a quick statement or announcement or something. So I guess thank you all very much. And when is the next when is this next meeting? The Flux Late meeting. Does anyone have that on their calendar?
The Flux Late meeting will be in 2 weeks, I think.
Yeah, Thursday, the 12th. Okay, cool.
Yep, that's right. Okay, thanks everyone for joining us.
Thanks.
Yeah. Oh, are you, Evan and Nick, are you on, and Alan, I guess, are you all on in CNCF Slack Flux channel? Or where should we connect?
CNCF
I'm-
Slack works. Oh, sorry.
I am theoretically in the CNCF Slack, though I don't believe I'm in the Flux channel there. I'm often lurking or not so lurking on the Kubernetes channel in the GitOps. Sorry, the Kubernetes Slack instance in the GitOps channel there.
Cool.
So if I'm not responding elsewhere, that's a good place.
Awesome. Okay. I'll just give a wave and then we can follow up however we feel like we have time for. Yeah. All right. Well, we will see you next time. Have a good time, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.